Hello, everybody. Welcome along to today's episode of the Event Industry News Podcast. My name's James Dickson, and wishing all of our podcast followers a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you're tuning into today's podcast from. Two guests on today's show, always fantastic, because it makes my job a lot easier when we've got two educated people willing to talk about their area of expertise. Joining us, first of all, is Nick Dugdale Moor. Nick is the Regional Manager for Europe for UFI, and on the other line, and I didn't ask where you are today, Lou. Whereabouts are you?
I'm at the Grand Hall at Olympia today. From
the Grand Hall at Olympia, the perfect setting to talk about the events industry. Lou Kiwanuka, who's the Vice Chair of ESSA and also a member of ESSA via her company EventShaper, of which I think you're Managing Director, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. We've got Nick and Lou onto the podcast today to look at the subject of trade associations and look at their value. We posed a question on Twitter earlier on today, prior to hitting record on this podcast, of whether or not trade associations do enough for their members and the industry. In hindsight, it would have been good to maybe get that poll going a little bit earlier, maybe generate a little bit more feedback, because I don't think looking at the stats on that particular Twitter poll, we can really draw too much into it. It was about 50-50, but trade associations, Nick, have been around for a long time. As long as there have been businesses, there have been collaborations of businesses and groups of organisers and businesses getting together to help shape their industry, whichever industry they work in. Give us, I suppose, first of all, we should maybe talk a little bit about what each of your respective organisations do and the particular areas of the industry they serve. So, Nick, to you first of all, and about UFI.
So UFI, we are the global association of the exhibition industry. We relatively small. We have just under 800 members. 70% of them are international exhibition organisers. 30% are venues, because some of them cross over and do both. And about 15% are the others. And there we have 56 national associations and regional associations like the AO in the UK, and a handful, not too many, service providers and partners, so convention bureaus, etc.
Excellent. And Lou, for those who aren't aware of ESSA, the Event Supplier and Services Association, tell us a little bit about what ESSA do and who they represent.
So ESSA represents a really broad range of contractors and suppliers to the event and exhibitions industry. So going from core stand contractor communities through to AV, catering suppliers, hostess and host providers. So quite broad range. We've been going for 10 years. We had our 10-year anniversary last year, so really starting to get into the nitty-gritty of being a full-on trade association, serving as many of our members as we can to the best of our ability.
Well, that leads us nicely. So when you say serving our members as best we can, because ultimately that's what any association is there to do, is to serve the members, regardless of what it is that they're doing professionally and what line of work they're in. How do your respective organisations serve their members? What I suppose is their mantra? Coming back to you, Nick, why was UFI established, and ultimately what's its core objective?
UFI was established in 1925. So prior to that, there were large, the International Show of the International Fair of Paris and the International Fair of Rome. And around this time, there was proliferation of new expos and fairs starting up that were perhaps of a lesser quality. So the original founding members got together and said, look, we want to establish this association that represents our values and quality and data and reliable, trustworthy events has always been at the heart of what we do, and so they got together and founded UFI back then. Last week I was in Zagreb for Zagreb Fair's 110th anniversary, and they were one of our founding members back in 1925. What we do nowadays, we have a PIN strategy that we've had for the last decade or so, which is promote, inform, and network. So promote, obviously, at a global level or even at a national level. Our industry is not particularly well understood. If you look at it from the point of view of government business, we're qualified as integrated media, which, alongside WPP and people like that, which obviously we have nothing to do with. So, some business events, whether that's congresses or what have you, it's relatively easy to measure the economic impact, heads and beds, if you like, whereas exhibitions, trade fairs, we represent much more than that. We help the industries, whatever that trade show is, 40, 50 years ago, they were much more transactional. So deals used to get done. Now it's not necessarily the case, but it's hard to measure. But certainly they play a really vital part in all of those industries that we serve.
Okay, and Lou, I suppose it's a nice balance on the show today between the two organisations. Nick, as he said, represents trade show organisers, fairground owners, national and international exhibition associations, where ESSA is very much about the suppliers, the contractors who are servicing and serving those venues and those organisers.
Yeah, so the great thing about ESSA is we've got such a broad range of members that we've got massive amounts of intelligence in our community that could really drive the success of shows, and are really on the other side of it, kind of drive best practice and kind of get to the nuts and bolts of some of the issues that our industry faces, particularly in light of things like reduced tenancies and some of the pressures that our events now come under. So we are at the raw end of things, but in that sense we're kind of primed to present opportunities as well as challenges.
Well, when I look at associations and trade associations, on the one hand, it strikes me that there's a bit of a strange situation going on, because a lot of the members for both your organisations will be potentially competing businesses within the same marketplace. Why would businesses who are essentially in competition with one another want to get together and, I don't know, share ideas and things? Surely they're just giving away what they're doing and giving ideas to people who could be taking business from them.
So from a lot of what we see, it's about raising standards so that you elevate the collective, not just the individual. Our individual responsibilities within our companies are all about raising our individual standards, lifting our individual efficiencies. But there is a requirement, I think, across the industry to join forces sometimes and kind of present an other opportunity or another set of options that we could influence and make a change across the industry. I think over the years we have become more insular in our own companies, and as such, actually, we've lost some things in our industry that we used to consider quite valuable. Things like welfare of our contractors and things is negated now because we are a large number of individual companies. Yeah, we've kind of lost our momentum in terms of saying as a collective community, these are the things that we consider to be important and essential in delivering events to the standard that our organisers and our venues would like us to.
And just to sort of keep on ESSA for a moment, Nick, if you don't mind, is something that I read, Lou, on the ESSA website in preparation for today's podcast, which was the process of applying to become a member of the organisation and the positives that I think that process brings. One of them was that a business has to have been traded for 12 months and have sponsors, people within the industry who can vouch for the work that they've done. So there's a level of integrity that comes just from applying and being accepted as a member, which in turn presumably allows ESSA members to then paint themselves and put themselves in a position of good standing when it comes to selling their own services.
So yes, in terms of that, ESSA are looking at the moment at taking that a step further. It's always important for a trade association to provide opportunities for their members to step themselves aside from the hundreds of other companies out there and put themselves as a trade checked kind of company. And ESSA are at the moment investing heavily in an accreditation scheme with a view to, again, kind of lifting the standard of contractors that are part of the ESSA community.
Nick, just coming across to you and asking the same question that I put to Lou about, businesses that are essentially competing with each other in the same marketplace. And that's no different for venues and major international event organisers. What are really some of the positives that you see when you're working with your own clients in terms of what they get out of being a member?
Well, I fully echo what Lou said about, we need to collaborate to kind of raise standards collectively. And obviously, if we're kind of growing the pie, between us, that helps everybody. Beyond that, look, we do a lot of research, and we ask, at a CEO level, what keeps you awake at night? What are your biggest challenges? And often the similar ones come up, and not surprisingly, it's economic situation locally and globally, but then also kind of internal challenges, which is like HR, which can be the impact of digitization in your company or your events. So these are issues that affect us all, and that's to get these answers, that's the raison d'etre of a trade association. And finally, the end of our PIN strategy, the networking. We run about 6 global events all around the world every year, from a small CEO summit to kind of our larger congress is still quite small. It's 500 people, but if you're interested in international events and you want to know about maybe taking your show to Indonesia or Thailand or somewhere in Southeast Asia or Brazil or wherever it may be, she's over there or he's over there. There's a guy from that country. So the business opportunity, because a lot of these events, if you look at how much, firstly, private equity money is, how much consolidation is happening in the industry. People are buying and selling shows all the time. And, there's a few kind of very canny operators that you see at the UFI events sitting in a corner, and then, having these meetings. And then a few months down the line, you kind of see the deals that they've done. So, yes, we're on a day-to-day basis, you're competing at an individual show level, perhaps, but, it's a fast-moving landscape, and, there's a lot of value to be had from this kind of network.
I know that the question that's often asked, and not just in the events industry, we should be fair about any trade association in any industry sector. I've heard over many years, going back to when I worked in publishing and in advertising, asking of traders, well, what's the point of being a member? What do they actually offer us? And actually, there's a flip side to that as well, which often doesn't get asked as much, which is, are the members of these associations doing enough to actively engage with what's available to them? Do we think that that's a more pertinent way to look at it?
Yes. I mean, look, if I can jump in there, just because I did before Lou did. Yes, look, just because it's like if you get a gym membership, just because you've kind of paid the money and got a card, that doesn't get you fit. You've got to actually take advantage of it. For an association, we have a lot of members that have minimal engagement, that, they don't come to our events, they don't take part in our awards, they don't, take part in our education programs. And I guess, hopefully there is still some value, the same value as you said, being a member of ESSA, you need to be introduced and sponsored and promoted by current UFI members. And then perhaps that's enough for them. But, it's not rocket science. The more you put in, the more engaged you are. Similar to the AEO and other associations, we have working groups in sustainability or in marketing or not. So whatever part of the business you're in, I mean, if you're passing that knowledge on to your staff and your company and encouraging them to kind of engage, then you'll get more value. I mean, it really is science. So that is the pertinent question. Ask not what your association can do for you.
I would say
written down here, that very quote, Nick, that very quote. I held back from shouting it.
I would say, I mean, I'm going to answer this one as a member, because obviously the only reason I'm vice chair is because I'm a member of ESSA and have been for a number of years now. Maybe definitely not as long as a lot of members. But my reason for joining the trade association, bearing in mind what we do, which is actually operational management. So our peers sit under the AEO rather than ESSA. So it's not, potentially sometimes not our natural home. But the purpose for doing it, for me personally, within my business, is to affect change, to influence the future, and to make our world, however small that might be, a better place to be. So that's quite, kind of the one reason for joining, and I've absolutely benefited as a result of that, just by making our day-to-day world better for having been part of ESSA. There are so many other companies that just want it for the kind of the tick box, the kind of quality standard, the charter, all those kind of things as to add on to the bottom of their emails as part of the selling tool. And then there's a huge array in between who might make use of it for, some kind of legal helpline options, or, employment law options, or just networking. When I say just networking, that's pretty much one of the biggest reasons that we all join these things, is to be in a room of like-minded or not like-minded people, and open our eyes and meet people that we wouldn't meet otherwise. So I think it's one of the, I kind of see it as a bit of a pick and mix. So the job of a trade association is to ensure that there's enough variety in their offering to fit all the different reasons, or as many of the different reasons as possible, that somebody would possibly want to join a trade association. And that, for one, is not going to be the same as another.
In both of your organisations, how accurately do you monitor or track the engagement that comes from your own members? The incoming inquiries and the incoming requests for information from your actual members. It's something that is monitored really, really closely.
To be honest, I'm probably not the right person to answer that one, so I'm going to pass that one over to Nick.
Yeah, go, jump in, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, how do we monitor it? So the way we're structured, our headquarters are in Paris, and I now look after our European members. We have an office in Hong Kong. We look after our Asian members. We have a guy in Dubai who's looking after the region there, and Anna Maria Arango in Bogota. So the first point of contact will be the regional managers.
Yes.
But there are long-standing relationships with, different members of our team. So, if it looks after research, they'll have, that question, or sustainability, or whatever. So, as I said, a lot of our members are very engaged. The vast majority, the majority, I'd say, sit in the middle. And as similar to what Lou said, there are a few that are not engaged, and that's our challenge, to kind of reach out to them and to kind of get them engaged, because there are, if we can't demonstrate the value of this membership fee, then there's a problem there somewhere. That's definitely our failing.
Yeah, absolutely, and that must be frustrating sometimes, because, as you said, members of associations pay a membership fee. That they will fund the organisation through subscriptions every year, and inevitably you will get in some industries and in some associations, members coming back at the end of the year saying, "Well, I'm not going to bother renew. I spent all that money and I didn't get anything from it." And you're, I guess, having to sort of fight a constant battle, Lou, between justifying the cost of membership in order to keep the organisation going, and actually then having the guts to question a member when they haven't actually actively engaged with the organisation in a 12-month period.
Yeah, absolutely. So we recently, as the board, kind of did a full day strategy and got some real nitty-gritty kind of feedback from a broad range of our members, just both qualitative and quantitative. Some of the qualitative feedback was, it's quite hard to hear in some cases, but it's important that the industry listens to that, because we might not have the solutions for every single individual example of a problem, but it's important to see those kind of running themes. So you could maybe collect 4 or 5 pieces of feedback that have got kind of a similar narrative, or a running common thread that might identify an issue with another part of our industry. And if we don't get that feedback, we're not doing our job properly.
And that ties in very, very nicely with the ethos of the industry that both organisations are serving. The events industry, perhaps more so than the other industry, is built on continually bettering itself, obtaining feedback post-event, finding out what went well, but more often than not finding out what didn't go so well, and looking at ways to improve that. Nick, when it comes to UFI, are you guys... I guess there's a proactive engagement with the members to find out what it could be doing better, but how do you look at other trade associations in other industries and see what they're doing for inspiration?
Well, I mean, as I said, we have like 56 associations that are our members, and that's a kind of unique community, if you like. They meet together 2 or 3 times a year, and it depends, who we get the biggest mixes at the Congress. The easiest thing to measure is our events, because we work with Explory and get some decent robust reports there on how we're performing against our own events, against other industry events. So for the events, which the networking remains the number one value and priority for our members, we have really strong feedback, and look, you can't please all the people all the time, but as Lou said, you need that honest feedback to move forward. So we're constantly looking at that. Beyond that, we do an annual membership survey about more broadly most of our activities. But yeah, I mean, to go back to your previous point about how do you demonstrate the value?
Yeah.
I mean, it's different from us. You know, in Europe, we're perhaps, well, we are certainly better known, and in Asia now, you know, in Latin America, where we only set up an office a year ago and started the chapter there 4 years ago, we're less well known. So it's not a question, you know, it's just UFI in itself isn't well known, and we have to kind of start from afresh. So that's a different conversation to you know, an unengaged member, which may be that perhaps, you know, we've typically spoken to one particular person at a board level, and there's kind of like a blockage, and that information isn't getting filtered down to the rest of the company, which you know, also happens.
Sure. And Lou, as part of the Events Industry Alliance, ESSA is closely aligned with the Association of Event Venues, the Association of Event Organisers. Does that put you in a very, very good position, and does ESSA thrive off the fact that it can work closely with these other organisations who are representing similar interests but in a slightly different sector of the same industry, and look at what they're doing and share best practices there internally?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're not all going to agree all the time, and we all got our own members to serve, but the collective does provide massive opportunity for us to address things on an industry-wide scale. There are some things that organisers do and venues do that they have no idea what the impact is on a contractor, and by us having that alliance there, we've got a platform that's immediately available to us to raise that. I mean, sometimes it's just a tweak that's needed to resolve a whole raft of issues, and then there's the bigger stuff where, you know, we're looking at some of the biggest subjects of our industry at the moment in terms of efficiencies and how we turn events in and out that would benefit all three parties if we could find some solutions to it. So it's brilliant that there's that platform there. It's down to us how we use it.
And something else, just while we're speaking, Lou, about you mentioned that you're at Olympia today, you know, one of the UK's, you know, most famous and historic event venues, and a major event venue. Do you think that from a procurement point of view, organisers pay genuine attention to a supplier that will be aligned with a trade association like ESSA, that has got that logo at the bottom of their email or on the side of their vehicles? Is it something that people pay attention to, or is it just something that we imagine makes a difference?
I think this is something that's going to increase as we go into the future as well. Certainly, kind of with my kind of two hats on, in terms of, you know, I'm responsible for operationally delivering, you know, a good chunk of shows here in the UK and overseas. We, you know, write it into part of our safety planning and our kind of project planning process with our clients that, you know, if you aren't using a member of a trade association, why aren't you? Because there's certain you know, not so much guarantees, but as we're faced with all kinds of risks in what we're doing. If you were just going to pick a company off the shelf with no vetting, no recourse should anything not go to plan, and you've got, you know, no other information to go off. It's just one of those things that's just so easy to be able to tick off. So not the only thing that we look at when we're sourcing contractors, but it's certainly one of the key things. Are they a member of a reputable trade association? Do they pay their bills on time? Is their, you know, credit worthiness good?
Yeah.
Can they afford to deliver the job? You know, how strong are they? How stable are they? What's their safety record like? All these kind of things are kind of underpinned by that trade association membership.
Sure. It's a slightly different, I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but a slightly different scenario with UFI, given the type of members that you've got, being venues and organisers and trade fairs and international fairs. But is there still this sort of presence that being a member of your own organisation brings to them as an organiser?
Of course, and it's very similar. I mean, if you're a company looking to exhibit at a trade show in the UK, and you're using an ESSA member, you can be guaranteed of a certain standard of quality, and if something goes wrong, of recourse, and just what Lou was saying. The same if you're deciding to exhibit at, an automotive show in China, and there's 4 automotive shows. I don't know, it's more difficult, and there are trade associations that can take you out there, but I mean, again, that's a huge investment, and like big or small, it's all relative. To have an OOFI, if that event, the one of the 4 is an OOFI approved event, and they're an OOFI member, then yes, you can absolutely vouch for the fact that it's a reputable event, that its figures and its data on visitors and exhibitors are what they say they are, and that yes, we know the people kind of behind the event, and we can vouch for them.
I know the other major consideration, I suppose, that I would consider is that we now work in an age where there is so much more documentation, consideration when it comes to safety, adhering to certain procedures, protocols, and certainly in the UK, we've got a fantastic reputation for doing that, for delivering fantastic events, fantastic creative events, but doing those to a really high standard, to a really safe standard as well. And if you compare it to when organisations like OOFI would have started, 100 or so years ago, the way in which events were organised back then will be completely different now. So more so than ever, having some sort of centralised support for things like documentation, best practice, personally, I think more than ever, that's where associations like this will come into their own, Lou.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the key reasons why I became a member was it was around the time that CDM regulations were kind of sniffing around, and we knew that there was a big change coming. And I didn't want to be on the sidelines sitting there and not affect how that influenced our industry, because it could have gone one way or another. We could have ended up spending thousands and thousands of pounds on every show on mitigating building reg style CDM, but actually we're not the building industry, we're an event industry, and actually being part of an association for me meant that I was able to affect that to the best outcome possible from my viewpoint. It allowed me and my business to have a say, have a seat at the table at a time that could have gone one way or another, and that's something that I think is massively important. We're not the size of industry where individuals can't make a difference. So I think I'm personally really passionate that associations do provide the opportunity for individuals to really make a mark, and there's so much we can do to improve what we do. It just takes people getting together, having a good old chinwag, going, do you know what, that really affects me, and someone going, do you know what, I had no idea, and that would be such an easy fix. And until all of those little bits and pieces are done, I'm not retiring.
and Nick, just finally, before we wrap up today's episode, again, similarly, OOFI is representing people in an industry, but on a global level. So when it comes to sharing ideas, is it nice to sometimes sit back and see not just companies working in the same industry, but people from, vastly different regions of the world sharing ideas and actually influencing whole regions by looking at how one area is doing it well and how they could perhaps improve?
Absolutely. I mean, look, talking to continue on health and safety, unfortunately, there are parts of the world where there are accidents and people are still dying on build-ups, which is totally unacceptable in this day and age. However, it happens. When we're focused or primarily our members of the organisers, they are still the venues. And so, obviously quite rightly, there are difficult questions to be asked. But as you said, the UK punches above its weight in terms of events, in terms of, organising, in terms of building events. And we can fully support that and amplify the good work that's done. So a few years ago, the G Guide was developed, and I believe ESSA was kind of part of that, which was a set of standards for event build, for health and safety. And we fully support that, and can, what we've got is the platform to help push that out around the world, and our awards, we run annual awards in operations, and that's free from everyone around the world. So we can take best practice from wherever it is, and again, show that to, and it doesn't matter where you are, you can learn from your peers, And at the end of the day, it's not rocket science what we do, filling a trade show, which is put the stands in. And even though in many ways it's moved on, if you look at the floor plan of the Great Exhibition in 1851, it hasn't really changed much at all. But yeah, we can, so all of our colleagues around the world face the same questions, and together we can help. And just briefly on that, sorry.
No, please.
2 weeks ago, or last week, in fact, was Global Exhibitions Day, which there's many of these global days, but the Global Exhibitions Day is where, our whole industry does come together. And we had, there's two goals of it. One of them is to promote our industry to governments, to big business, but also to celebrate the kind of people that work in it. And we had, I think, around 90 countries taking part. We're still collating all the data. But yeah, just it's a chance for us all, because we are the association of the face-to-face industry, and it's nice just to kind of get out of your tunnel, once in a while, and realize, that we're part of this big global industry, and we're all, answering the same questions, doing the same thing, in it for the same reason.
Absolutely. Guys, we've run out of time on today's episode, but thank you very much for joining us. Our guests today on the podcast have been Nick Dugdale Moor. Nick is the UFI Regional Manager for Europe, and Lou Kiwanuka, Vice Chair of the ESSA Board and a member of ESSA via her company EventShaper. Guys, thank you very much for joining the podcast today and talking and giving us a little bit of an insight about the great work that the trade associations do within the events industry. It's several of them, but I think from a personal opinion, they do great work, and more so than ever, we need to be working collectively to make sure that we're doing things as best as possible and continuing to push, certainly in the UK, our standing as one of the leaders in the events industry globally. Guys, thanks very much for joining the podcast. If you want to find out a little bit more about either of the associations that we've spoken about today, ufi.org is the website for UFI, and ESSA, essa.uk.com is the website for ESSA. If you're watching today's podcast on the Event Industry News website, head over to Podbean or to iTunes or whatever podcast platform you use to download your podcasts. All of the podcasts are available via audio-only versions that you can listen to on your commute to and from work. If you're listening to today's podcast, the reverse to that is head over to eventindustrynews.com. You can see videos of all of our previous episodes and also check out some of the features, content and news that is on Event Industry News while you're there. Thanks very much again to our guests, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, James.